"Look, it's a jaguar." David quickly looked in the direction his teammate pointed and was shocked to see a full-grown leopard clinging desperately to a jagged rock in the middle of the water. Its fur was now soaked and matted, its body trembling with every muscle, exhausted. The water below rose angrily, surging and splashing as if it wanted to attack the weakened predator. David surmised that the jaguar must have been swept away during the chaos of last night's storm, disoriented and carried far from its territory. Now it was stranded, perched precariously on a rock with no escape in sight. The storm had been merciless, ripping through the Florida Reserve with a vengeance. Branches cracked like gunfire, ancient trees were torn from the earth, and debris cascaded into rivers swollen beyond their banks. Streams became torrents, transforming the reserve's waterways into roaring, treacherous currents. The patrol boat navigated cautiously through the storm's aftermath, its motor sputtering as debris tangled around the propeller, threatening to stall their progress entirely. The team, part of the reserve's environmental protection unit, moved in tense silence, their eyes darting between the water's surface and the treacherous shoreline. "Watch the left!" one of them called out sharply as a jagged branch emerged from the murk. David gripped the side of the boat, his knuckles white. "Keep it steady," he said, his voice low but firm. "We can't afford to lose control out here." The boat lurched as it scraped against something submerged, drawing a collective breath from the crew. Each moment felt like a gamble they couldn't afford to lose. After, David had fixed his attention on the shoreline. He was looking for any indication of illegal activity, structural damage, or displaced wildlife when he spotted it. One of the crew members suddenly pointed toward the shoreline, their voice cutting through the steady hum of the motor. "Look!" David snapped his head in the direction indicated. His breath caught as he spotted a jaguar. For a moment, the jaguar's amber eyes flicked toward the boat, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "Stop the boat," David said firmly, his tone sharpening with urgency. "We need to get closer." The boat slowed, and every head turned toward the jaguar. A ripple of unease passed through the crew as they took in the sight of the magnificent predator. It was a rare and breathtaking creature, its sleek coat marred by mud and debris, but its very presence was a stark reminder of the danger it posed. "This isn't just any animal," one of the younger crew members muttered, his voice laced with apprehension. "It's a jaguar, David." David didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the jaguar, its labored breaths and drooping shoulders telling a story of desperation. He didn't just see a predator, he saw a survivor, a creature thrust into an impossible situation by forces beyond its control. Yet he also knew the risks all too well. "We can't leave it there," David said at last, his voice firm, though his heart pounded with uncertainty. He turned to his crewmates, his expression resolute. "Look at it. It won't make it through another hour like this. If we don't help, it's as good as dead." Silence fell over the boat as the team exchanged uneasy glances. David could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He didn't just want to protect the reserve's creatures, he wanted to honor their right to survive, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way. Logan Bennett, gripping the motor's controls, turned to face him, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "That's suicide," he snapped. "You're talking about risking all of us for a predator that could rip your throat out the moment you get close." The tension spread like wildfire. Jessie, the medic, glanced nervously between them. "He's not wrong, David," she murmured. "It's a jaguar. This isn't a stranded deer. One wrong move and—" "I'll take full responsibility," David interrupted, his tone firm. "This isn't up for debate." Logan slammed his hand on the console. "You're damn right it's not. But this isn't about responsibility. It's about common sense. That thing's dangerous." "And so is this river," David shot back, gesturing at the swirling currents. "You're the one always preaching that nature is ruthless. Well, it's our job to balance the scales when we can." The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on them. The jaguar let out a weak snarl, its strength ebbing. The sound was both defiant and heartbreaking, a reminder that even the fiercest creatures had limits. "It's too risky," Logan muttered, shaking his head. "We should report it. Let someone else handle it." "There's no one else," David said firmly. "We're here, now. If we turn our backs, it dies. Is that what we want on our conscience?" The team exchanged glances. Tensions flared as sides were quietly drawn. Parker, the youngest member, shifted uncomfortably. "David's right," he said hesitantly. "We can't just watch it drown." Jessie sighed, rubbing her temples. "Fine, but we do this smart. No heroics." Logan threw up his hands in frustration. "I hope you all realize what you're signing up for." The team worked swiftly, aware that every passing second could mean the difference between life and death for the jaguar. The river surged around them, its powerful current threatening to smash their small boat into the jagged rocks ahead. Logan, gripping the rudder tightly, muttered under his breath about the risk, but he didn't argue further. He kept the boat steady, though the strain showed in his clenched jaw. David tied a rope around the boat's prow, securing it to a sturdy tree branch extending over the water. "Hold her steady," he shouted back. The crew adjusted the tension on the rope, ensuring the boat didn't drift. With the immediate danger managed, David turned his focus to the jaguar. It clung desperately to the rock, water lapping at its sides, its golden eyes locked on him. "Easy now," David murmured, his voice low and calm. He grabbed a long pole equipped with a noose at the end, carefully testing its weight. His movements were deliberate, measured. He inched toward the jaguar, bracing himself against the boat's side. The animal's ears flattened, and it let out a weak, rasping growl. It had strength left, but not much. David paused, letting the jaguar take him in. He spoke softly, his words meaningless, but his tone soothing. "You've had a rough day, haven't you, buddy? Let me help you out of this mess." The jaguar didn't respond, of course, but its growl subsided into a low, steady rumble. David extended the pole, aiming to loop the noose around the animal's chest. He moved with precision, mindful of the jaguar's sharp claws and teeth. The water splashed as the pole tip dipped, and the jaguar flinched. "Steady," David whispered, tightening his grip. He maneuvered the noose closer, carefully slipping it over the jaguar's front legs. A surge of relief rippled through him when the loop secured in place. He gave a quick signal to the team. "Start pulling, slow and easy." The rope strained as the crew heaved, their muscles taut under the effort. The jaguar snarled weakly, its claws scratching at the rock as it resisted the pull. David grabbed a thick piece of fabric and leaned over, careful to keep his balance on the shifting boat. With a quick, practiced motion, he draped the cloth over the jaguar's head, dimming its vision and easing its panic. "That's it," David said, his voice firm but gentle. "Almost there." The jaguar's resistance lessened, its body limp with exhaustion. David adjusted the noose, ensuring it didn't tighten too much as the team hauled the animal closer. The jaguar's paws finally left the rock, dangling above the rushing water as it was lifted into the boat. The crew scrambled to secure the animal. A metal cage sat waiting in the boat's center, its door propped open. David and another team member guided the jaguar inside, careful not to hurt it. The door slammed shut with a satisfying click, and they latched it securely. The boat rocked as everyone exhaled, the tension breaking like a wave. Logan wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, his earlier grumbling forgotten. "That thing's bigger up close," he muttered, earning a faint chuckle from the team. David crouched beside the cage, studying the jaguar. It lay still, its chest rising and falling rapidly. Water dripped from its sleek coat, pooling at the bottom of the cage. The animal's eyes, though dulled by exhaustion, flicked toward him. There was no malice in that gaze, only wariness and an indomitable spirit. The team sat in tense silence, their eyes darting toward the cage resting precariously at the center of the boat. Inside, the jaguar lay motionless, its sides heaving faintly with every shallow breath. The rhythmic lapping of water against the hull was the only sound. No one spoke. Even Logan, usually quick to dismiss danger, gripped the edge of the boat as if expecting the animal to lunge at any second. But the jaguar didn't move. Its fur, soaked and clumped together, revealed jagged cuts on its flanks. Its paw hung awkwardly against the metal floor of the cage, a stark contrast to the strength they all knew lay dormant beneath its battered exterior. David crouched low beside the cage, a flashlight in one hand and a first aid kit in the other. "It's weaker than I thought," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's not going anywhere." He slid the kit closer and carefully opened the cage door, just enough to slip his hand inside. The jaguar's ears flicked, but it didn't resist. David's hands moved deftly, cleaning the worst of the wounds with antiseptic wipes. His touch was steady, his face unreadable. Logan leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "You really think it'll make it?" he asked, his usual bravado replaced by genuine concern. David didn't answer immediately. His focus remained on the jaguar's battered body. "It's tough," he finally said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Tougher than most of us, probably." Logan scoffed, but didn't argue, his gaze lingering on the jaguar's still form. As the boat pushed further downriver, the tension on board began to ease. Some of the younger members started talking again, their voices low but tinged with relief. One of them, Alex, leaned back and let out a nervous chuckle. "Never thought I'd share a boat with a jaguar," he quipped. His joke earned a few half-hearted laughs, but it broke the spell of fear that had hung over them. Logan, emboldened by the shift in mood, pointed toward the cage. "Bet? It's dreaming about biting your arm off, Alex." The group laughed louder this time, the sound carrying over the water. Even David allowed a small smile to tug at the corner of his mouth. But the jaguar's plight remained heavy in the back of everyone's mind. Its quiet struggle against the river had transformed it from a predator into a creature deserving of their compassion. Even Logan, who had been the first to argue against saving it, now watched over the cage like a hawk. David finally stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "It's stable for now," he announced. The group nodded, their relief palpable. But as they glanced at one another, it became clear that the jaguar's rescue had taken on a weight none of them had anticipated. "We're taking it back," David said firmly, cutting through the lingering uncertainty. Logan raised a skeptical brow. "To the station? You sure that's a good idea?" "It's not exactly standard procedure." "It's the only thing that makes sense," David replied. "Leaving it out here isn't an option." His tone brooked no argument, and Logan didn't push further. The team began to prepare for the final leg of their journey. They checked the cage's locks and adjusted the tarp to shield the jaguar from the wind. As they worked, the mood on the boat shifted again, this time toward quiet determination. The jaguar, whether they admitted it or not, had become their responsibility. As the boat neared the station, the sky began to lighten, a faint blush of dawn creeping over the horizon. The jaguar stirred for the first time, its eyes fluttering open. It didn't roar or thrash, but simply watched them through the bars, its golden gaze piercing. Logan froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Well," Alex whispered, breaking the silence, "I guess it's not dreaming about biting my arm off anymore." This time, even David laughed. The jaguar blinked slowly, its gaze unwavering, and for a moment, it seemed to understand what they had done for it. The boat pushed forward, the station now visible in the distance. The jaguar lay back down, its breathing steady, its fate intertwined with the humans who had pulled it from the river. At the ranger station, the patrol team carefully transferred the exhausted jaguar into a temporary enclosure. They named her Kira, a nod to the shimmering resilience in her eyes, despite her weakened state. Kira was still cautious, pacing the perimeter of the enclosure, her gaze darting between the unfamiliar humans who surrounded her. The team knew it would take time to earn her trust. David, the one who had risked his life to save her, was the first to approach. Holding a small piece of raw meat at arm's length, he crouched low, speaking softly to her, as if his voice could bridge the gap between man and beast. Kira didn't move, her muscles tense, eyes locked on him. Minutes passed like hours before she finally stepped forward, taking the food cautiously before retreating to her corner. David didn't push further. Building trust with a wild animal was about patience, not force. Over the following days, the team worked in shifts to care for Kira. Feeding her was always a careful process. Any sudden movement could undo their progress. She was skittish, her wild instincts sharpened by survival. David often led the efforts, his calm demeanor and steady presence earning small victories each day. He would sit by her enclosure, sometimes reading aloud from an old book, his voice a constant in her new, uncertain world. Kira began to watch him, her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. Checking her wounds was another challenge. The deep gash on her flank had become infected, and treating it required the team to sedate her lightly. Even sedated, Kira's body radiated strength, a reminder of the predator she was. They worked quickly and efficiently, ensuring she was as comfortable as possible. Each time they finished, they left her favorite food nearby, reinforcing that their presence meant safety, not harm. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation in Kira was undeniable. Her initial defensiveness softened into cautious curiosity. She began to associate the team with care and safety, though she remained wary of loud noises or sudden movements. David, however, had become a constant in her world. When he approached, her posture relaxed. She would sniff his hand through the enclosure, a small but significant gesture of trust. One crisp morning, Kira surprised everyone. David entered the enclosure to replace her water bowl, as he had done countless times before. This time, instead of retreating, Kira approached him. Slowly, cautiously, she sniffed his hand and brushed against his leg. The moment was electric. David froze, his breath caught in his throat, but he didn't move. Kira lingered a moment longer before walking away, her tail flicking lazily. It was the first time she had initiated contact, and it marked a turning point. From that day on, Kira's demeanor shifted. She grew more playful, testing her environment with gentle swipes at the toys the team had provided. A rubber ball became her favorite, and the sight of a jaguar batting it around like a house cat brought laughter and joy to the otherwise serious station. She began to recognize each member of the team, though her bond with David remained the strongest. She would often sit near him when he was around, her golden eyes watching his every move. As Kira's physical wounds healed, so did the invisible ones left by her ordeal. She regained her strength, her coat shining with health. The team knew her time at the station was coming to an end. While they had grown attached to her, their ultimate goal was her freedom. Kira belonged to the wild, not behind the walls of a station. The day of her release arrived faster than anyone had expected, and with it came a heavy mix of anticipation and heartache. The team transported Kira to a lush, untamed section of the protected forest, a place brimming with life yet untouched by human hands. When they reached the site, the jungle was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, a fitting symphony for her return to freedom. David approached the enclosure with deliberate calm, though his hands trembled ever so slightly. He unlatched the door, stepping back to give her space. Kira hesitated at the threshold, her movements uncharacteristically cautious. Her nose quivered as she inhaled the thick, earthy air of her homeland. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, as if weighing her next step. Then she turned, her golden eyes locking onto David's. The world seemed to pause. In that fleeting moment, it wasn't just a jaguar and a man standing there. It was two beings who had bridged an impossible divide. Her gaze spoke volumes, gratitude, understanding, and a bittersweet farewell. David felt his chest tighten, his heart aching with an unspoken bond that words could never capture. Then, with a graceful flick of her tail, Kira turned and bounded into the dense underbrush. The undergrowth swallowed her whole, her golden coat disappearing as if she'd become one with the forest. The team stood frozen, their breaths held as the jungle's noise seemed to fill the void she left behind. Slowly, the weight of the moment sank in, a mixture of pride for what they had accomplished and sorrow for what they had to let go. David's eyes lingered on the spot where she had vanished, replaying every moment of her recovery, the trembling creature they had pulled from the river, the cautious steps toward trust, the first time she had brushed against him. His throat tightened as he whispered, "She'll be okay." The quiet words seemed to lift a veil, and the others nodded, their faces a mirror of his emotions. They packed their equipment in silence, the jungle around them a reminder of the life they were protecting. David scanned the dense jungle ahead, his senses sharp. The sun was sinking low, casting long shadows through the trees. It had been an uneventful patrol until a sound broke through the buzz of insects, the harsh crack of wood splintering. His team halted. He signaled for silence, motioning toward the noise. They moved cautiously, rifles slung but ready. As they pushed closer, the scene unfolded. A group of loggers with chainsaws and heavy equipment, their trucks loaded with freshly cut timber. These men weren't amateurs. Their setup was organized, their tools expensive. David frowned. This operation wasn't just illegal, it was systematic. He whispered to his team, laying out the plan to confront and detain the intruders. They moved in quietly, their uniforms blending with the greens and browns of the forest. But something went wrong. One of the loggers spotted them and shouted a warning. Chaos erupted. The loggers didn't scatter. They turned aggressive, pulling out firearms from their trucks. There were more of them than David had anticipated, and their stance made it clear they weren't about to back down. "Fall back!" David yelled, but the terrain was rough, and his team struggled to find cover. Shots rang out, hitting trees and ricocheting off rocks. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and the tension of an uneven fight. David's team was outnumbered and outgunned, and the loggers were emboldened by their advantage. The situation grew desperate. One of his men stumbled, nearly hit by a stray bullet. David's mind raced, trying to devise a plan to get his team out alive. Suddenly, a sound cut through the din, a deep, resonating growl that sent chills through the chaos. From the shadow of the trees, Kira emerged. Her sleek, muscular form moved like liquid gold through the underbrush. Behind her, 3 other jaguars followed, their eyes gleaming in the fading light. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a roar that shook the ground, Kira leapt forward. The loggers froze, their bravado crumbling. One man screamed as Kira landed near him, her teeth bared in a snarl that left no room for misunderstanding. The other jaguars joined in, darting through the loggers' ranks with the precision of predators on the hunt. It wasn't a direct attack. They didn't harm anyone, but the speed and ferocity of their movements were enough to sow panic. The loggers dropped their tools and ran, tripping over roots and each other in their haste to escape. The sounds of chainsaws and shouting faded into the distance. David and his team watched in stunned silence. The jaguars hadn't touched them, hadn't even looked in their direction. It was as if Kira knew exactly who the enemy was. When the loggers had disappeared, Kira turned to face David. Her golden eyes met his for a brief moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Then, without a sound, she led her small group back into the forest, their sleek bodies vanishing into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. The team was speechless. Relief mixed with awe as they began to regroup. One of the younger members broke the silence. "Did that just happen?" he asked, his voice shaky. David nodded. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady but filled with wonder. "That just happened." Back at their base, the team couldn't stop talking about Kira. The jaguar had always been a symbol of their mission, a reminder of the wild they were sworn to protect. But tonight, Kira had become something more. She wasn't just a creature of the jungle. She was an ally, a guardian of the forest, who understood, in her own way, the danger posed by those who sought to destroy it. David sat alone later that night, staring into the fire. The memory of Kira's eyes stayed with him, a reminder of the connection between man and nature that was deeper than words. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but one thing was certain: the jungle had its heroes, and tonight, Kira had been theirs. Days turned into weeks, and the patrol team returned to their usual routes along the rugged riverbanks. Yet, there was a quiet shift in their dynamic. The once grueling monotony of their mission was now marked by an occasional, shadowy figure watching from the distance or padding silently alongside their boat. Kira, the jaguar they had once pulled from certain death, had become a silent guardian of their work. Whenever danger lurked, a crocodile too close, or suspicious activity in the underbrush, Kira's growl or sudden appearance would serve as a warning. Kira was more than just an ally. She was a symbol of resilience and connection. The patrol team, once wary of her untamed instincts, now embraced her as one of their own. Her name was etched onto their insignia, a sleek jaguar in mid-leap over crossed oars, representing their unity and shared mission. Kira had come to embody the bond they forged between duty and compassion. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the team docked near the edge of the reserve for a routine inspection. The air was heavy with the sense of damp earth and jungle blooms. While the others unpacked, David, the team leader, noticed Kira emerging from the thicket. She was calm, her golden eyes flickering in the dying light, but her presence always carried a purpose. David had learned to trust that. They followed her. Kira's agile frame wove through dense foliage, leading them deeper into the reserve. The team moved cautiously, their flashlights illuminating her path and revealing broken branches and fresh tracks. Soon, they stumbled upon a clearing where a group of poachers had set up camp. Piles of cut wood and animal pelts confirmed their worst suspicions. David signaled the team to split up, surrounding the area. The operation was swift. The poachers, caught off guard, had no time to resist. As the team secured the site, Kira watched from the shadows, her presence a reminder of what they were protecting. The event solidified her role within the team. She wasn't just an animal they had rescued, she was a partner. Her instincts and connection to the land had become invaluable to their mission. The story of the patrol team and their jaguar began to spread. Kira became a local legend, her tale shared in village squares and over campfires. She represented hope in a region often overshadowed by greed and destruction. But Kira's freedom remained untouched. She roamed the reserve, disappearing for days or weeks, only to return when the team needed her most. She lived as a wild creature should, untamed and unbound. Yet her loyalty to the team was unshakable. One quiet morning, David sat by the river, mending a fishing net as the team prepared for their next patrol. He glanced up and saw Kira lying lazily on a sunlit rock. There was a peacefulness in her posture, a confidence that spoke of trust. She had become more than a jaguar. She was a bridge, a living testament that man and nature could coexist. The team's insignia, now adorned on every boat and uniform, served as a constant reminder of their shared journey. Kira's story didn't end there. She continued to live freely between the patrol station and the reserve, a silent protector of both worlds. Her presence was a lasting testament to the team's mission and a beacon of hope for the people who lived along the river. And every time her shadow slipped through the trees, it reminded them that their work was bigger than themselves.